Today we're gonna do some basic knife skills. Alright, before we cut anything, it's always important to know how to wield the knife. So the proper way to hold a knife, you wanna put your palm, obviously on the handle, and then you wanna take your index and your thumb, and you wanna pinch the button. When you get to there, however it feels comfortable, I usually lock the rest of my fingers underneath the handle, and then pinch here. And that way you have complete control of your blade. It's not loose, it should not be loose, like you shouldn't be cutting like this, because you will probably cut yourself. The next important part is when you use your left hand, or if you're right-handed, it's gonna switch obviously, but this is your guide hand, and you kinda wanna claw your hands like this, and you're basically gonna use your knuckles as a guide so that you can keep cutting in the same place without stabbing yourself or like grazing your fingers. So every time you move, you want to like inch back your finger and keep cutting like that. And also when you use a knife, your vegetables will last a lot longer if you actually cut. Most people are used to cutting with a knife and like pushing down like this, which is not good for the vegetable because you're basically just crushing the cell walls of the vegetable. And if you actually slice, it's a lot more gentle and it will actually last longer instead of just crushing the cell walls of the vegetable.
Wait, what? It's like the same thing almost.
Right, but it's the way you're cutting it, it's not what it looks like. Like if I'm just doing this, I'm like putting brute force instead of letting the knife actually cut.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, well these are tips that most people don't know. It's not wrong, but I'm just telling you little things that can keep your produce to last longer. So the first cut we're gonna do is called a Julienne, which we're trying to achieve small, thin strips. Like if you have ever had a banh mi or like chow mein, there's always like thin shreds of carrots. We are going to cut sheets. Like that. And this is a cool trick that you can do. You just kind of shingle them like so. I mean, there's nothing wrong obviously with taking one sheet and achieving a Julienne like this, which is a Julienne. But if you were to do that all at one by one, it would take you forever. So if you shingle them like this and just go across the line, remember you want to use the knife. Let the knife do your work. You don't want to damage the vegetable. And then this is a Julienne. If you just saute these with little like oil, salt, pepper, or like oyster sauce or something, would be really good. We're gonna take these Julienne carrots and we're gonna turn these into a small dice or a Brunoise. Brunoise just means it's a small dice of any vegetable. So the trick is for Brunoise, instead of taking each little carrot and trying to make, you know, little squares from it like this and then going back and cutting little cubes. So you take your Julienne and you just line them up and you cut little squares. And remember, you're using your guide hand, cradling your fingers and using your knuckles as a guide to not cut yourself. Very nice Brunoise. So the nature of the vegetable, depending what kind of vegetable it is, will depend on how you're Brunoising something or making a Julienne. Like the way I Julienne this carrot and then Brunoise it would be much different than the way I'm gonna Brunoise and Julienne this onion. Because this onion has root end and it's obviously not the same shape at all. Now I'm gonna show you how to Julienne and Brunoise this onion. Obviously first you want to take the skin off. So I usually like to keep the root end on, and you will see why in just a second. But I'm going to take this end piece off. This stuff you can use for like vegetable stock, or it's good compost. And then I'm going to cut this in half from the root, but I'm going to keep the root end in, and you'll see in just a second. I always take the first layer off because you can see the skin sometimes kind of grows into the first layer, and this layer of onion is always really like waxy and papery, and it doesn't really taste so good. Now we're gonna brunoise this onion. So the reason why I like to keep the root end in is that it's gonna keep all these layers together, and we're gonna get a nicer end product. It depends on how you like it, but you can either cut this way first and then this way, but I'm gonna show you the way I do it. So you wanna make little cuts all through the onion. Cut straight through. And see how the root is kind of keeping all the layers intact. Yeah. So you just go back, cut down. Then you get a brunoise onion. Why did I choose this knife in particular? I got a good deal on it. I like the weight of this knife. I'm actually not in love with this handle, but it has good weight. It's very balanced for me, or the way I like to hold my knife. So we're gonna go back, and this little nugget I saved from the brunoise onion, we're gonna julienne this onion. Same idea as the carrot, except for you don't really need to make sheets, because onions are grown in like layers of sheets. People also call it feathering an onion, because when you cut it, they look like feathers. But yeah, we're just gonna cut them into little strips. And then look, they look like little feathers. You can get all separated. So this is julienne onion, also known as feathering an onion. They look like little feathers. And they're little tiny strips of vegetable cut, which is a julienne.
Wait, but you just cut the onion like that.
What?
Like straight down.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
Run the tape back.
Okay, never mind.
So when you're cutting any vegetable, it's pretty much the same. You just need to think about what you're cutting. Like a potato is much more softer. Well, this is like it's like a Yukon Gold potato. Like let's say I cut this in half. That was so easy, right? And it's very flat and nice. But if I take this carrot, which I know is much harder, it's a root vegetable, so it has more fibers in it. If I cut it, you can even hear it sounds, and you can see it's a little bit more not as flat. There's like a tiny little ridge right here, but that's just the nature of the vegetable. It'll be harder for you to cut straight with a root vegetable compared to this kind of root vegetable where it's much softer on the inside. One of my coworkers was cutting carrots, and it also depends on how your knife is sharpened, but he was cutting very quickly like this, like that. When he got into the middle of the carrot, which is much more tough, it caused a lot of tension, so he moved his hand like this, and then he went to cut again, and he cut like right into his fingers like that. And that's what you don't want to do.
Have you ever cut yourself cutting vegetables?
Oh yeah, all the time.
What's
Or
that?
many times, not all the time, but not anymore, but I did a lot before. So the first cut that we did was this julienne cut, which is you're trying to achieve strips of whatever vegetable you're cutting. I mean, julienne could also attain to meat or anything really, just as long as it's being cut into strips. And then we went from strips into a brunoise, which is a small dice. And again, the brunoise, you can just take your julienne cut and cut it the opposite way into cubes, small dice, to make a brunoise. Those are two very, very basic knife skills that everyone should know. Yeah, it's good skills to have. It's good for fried rice. All this stuff here you could just throw in a wok with some rice. Fry it up and make fried rice.
Why is the inside of that carrot yellow?
It's a fucking purple carrot, bro. I don't know. You gotta ask a botanist or a farmer.